Hello, Dr. Sam Dubé here once again for the Toronto Business Journal, and we're joined here today by Dan Jackson. Dan is the new managing director for QuestionPro, which is a global research and survey software as a service or SaaS provider. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sam. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. And you know, we had a nice chat just prior to pressing the record button here, and we were talking about you leaving university and this leading to your current position. But it was an interesting story you wanted to relate.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm glad to be here. I've been looking at what you guys have been doing for quite a while. So yeah, I want to start off with sort of the personal story and maybe relay some of my, my tales of navigating the job market as any Canadian right now, particularly during COVID, it was a challenge. It's starting to open up a bit, but still it's totally flipped on its head. And I would say about 15 years ago, I was working odd jobs after high school. I was like from, stocking shelves to factories, to a warehouse for a couple of years. And I always really was interested in ideas. I wouldn't say myself as like a scholar, but I've always anything interests me. I mean, I could sit down and listen to something. I was just listening to you talk. It was very interesting. And I just find everything interesting. And so I didn't want to say like I was above sort of those roles, but it was a really not something I wanted for the rest of my life to do. I also didn't really know what I wanted to do. So it was like this thing, but I know, so I went to school. That was about 2005. And so I started there, loved it, didn't do too well my first year. So I changed my major to political science and I would just love going to school every day. And I didn't really know what I was about to do. So I had a job. I was lucky enough to find a job that I only worked on the weekends. So it kept me out of trouble. So I actually stuck to my books, got it done. Come around 2011, I basically lost everything. So car, house, girlfriend, yada, yada. And didn't know what to do. And I think graduating was a big sort of, it was a, wall I hit too. It was sort of like all of that together and not knowing what you're about to do was really something that I was, that weighed on me. So I had to figure out something. So I was scrolling through websites. What do you want to do? And there was a catch. There was a catchy line that said, "Are you a curious person?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a curious person." Okay. And it was an ad for market research and social research. You want to call it market research, just the catch-all phrase. So it was a class. It was like an MBA, you would say, in market research, so polling, one-on-one interviews for information collection, focus groups. Have you seen like people doing focus groups? All that was kind of under the umbrella. And so when I went, I didn't get in because of there was a really stringent cutoff process. It was a college program. It really only gave 10% of applicants the go ahead. So, but I drove out there in the year after, and I just begged the vice dean at the time, the coordinator, and they let me in. So, long story short, I found something that was you could really do anything with it. So, in these programs, what they do, there's about 5 in Canada. There's ones in Quebec, Sherbrooke, UQAM, and then there's in Ontario, there's Georgian College, Centennial College has one, Humber College, and Algonquin. So with 6 in total, give or take. There's a lot of programs again that call itself, analytics or marketing research. But those programs are really focused on the full breadth of what I was saying earlier. So I got my hand. So it was a really good role on understanding people and trying to understand people. I remember driving as a kid past cities on the 401, and I would always say, like, what's going on in that town? Whether it's Hamilton, it's not on the 401, but you could Oshawa, you go to Kingston. I'm like, look, I see the population, what are they thinking? Like, what's going on over there? And this allowed me to kind of, find a job that actually, would better understand people, consumers, individuals, citizens. And yeah, here I am starting out, or here I was starting out. And yeah, I will get to some of the roles in a couple minutes, but yeah, that's how I got going.
Wow. So you came across your love of asking questions and finding out what people are thinking and what makes them tick. Quite honestly, then, it's a genuine passion. So now, speeding ahead to being this new managing director for QuestionPro, this is a large company, right? You mentioned to me, I think it was based in Austin, Texas, and you've got offices in different countries across the world. Am I correct?
That's right. That's right. So it is a global company. It's based in Austin, but it has offices in Dubai, London, Berlin, India, Latin America, Australia. But it's really regional in the sense where it's it's our location, it's our staff, it's our servers, it's our ability to tailor any need of the client at a local level. And that kind of segues into what I want to talk about with sort of QuestionPro and its ability to kind of tailor the needs of individual clients. Like, for instance, we were talking earlier before the call about sort of, what does research do? It's a pretty broad topic, but you could imagine that is broad because any client could do really anything with questions, right? Like whether you wanted to create a new product, whether you want to change a bike lane in a city, you're going to have to ask the people questions, whether it's your citizens or your customer base, to make the case to make a decision.
Right.
So it's broad in the sense where you're doing all that, and it has to be very tailored. So, for instance, Vancouver uses QuestionPro as its like plebiscite for making something like bike lanes or changing the mail delivery things. So you can't always do it on election. You have to do it sort of in creative ways using digital tools. And none of that data can exit Canada. It has to, we have a Canadian team starting now that will be taking over the ins and outs of it, what they're doing there. And so small companies, and then I'll give you another example quickly, is sort of, that's maybe on the big side and more citizen related, but there's also like small companies in Northern Ontario that are, creating, let's say one was doing horticulture, they were selling plants. And they wanted to know in that general vicinity if it was viable. So what do? You get people in the city, you ask them questions, and you're able to organize the data, and it'll tell you.
Okay, so that's quite a span of client that you have. You're talking about Vancouver, but presumably provincial or a government, local government of Vancouver, to a company dealing with horticulture. So then who are your clients and customers, if you can define them? Because I know you advertise any company that produces consumer products, government, and education. But if you can be a little bit more specific, and then what exactly do you provide for them? What exactly do you do for them? What ability do you give them?
So again, I'd love to be more specific as the client that we use. So again, that's a broad span of, it would be, okay, so somebody who works for the city of Vancouver, or a city, I should just move away from the specifics, I would say it would be a researcher within an organization. So it could be a marketer, it could be someone who is tasked with public opinion. It could be the directors themselves. It could be really any of that. I'm trying to think of specific clients. They don't really fit, which is it's a challenge on our part. But that's the beauty of I've always been very curious. So every client has these really unique needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm learning every time I hop into a call when they're saying like, this is my problem. I don't understand my consumer base. Or the next one is, how do we ask our city's population questions monthly? And so that I can deliver these reports to my higher ups. And so you have to think outside the box. You have to be creative, and that every client is very much different.
So we talk in terms of businesses, because we are doing this interview under the purview of the Toronto Business Journal. For instance, Toronto businesses, then, would a business simply contact QuestionPro and say, hey, I'd like to have a product that helps me or enables me to ask questions about what my customers want, or about what makes them tick, or I want a product that allows me to create my own questionnaire. These are all things that you can do.
Right. And a lot of people don't really know. They essentially, they know their problem and they know their business problem, but they need to find out how a tool, a digital tool, a software as a service, can help them. So a lot of the times it comes right out of left field. So for instance, they would be like, I want to do what's called a conjoint study. So a very complicated sort of questionnaire type that will determine the success of a product, but they're not really even wording it in those phrases. They're kind of giving you, here's what we're thinking of doing. We want to test A against B, C, D, E,
Mm-hmm.
and it has these parts of the product. And so you have to actually take that into account and find a solution that is within our services, because we have, over 60 question types. The interviews I was talking about more qualitative, where it's one-on-one interviews. We have the part of the software that actually can facilitate that. So a focus group. So there's 6 people in a thing, and you're asking more broader questions rather than, it's not going to get statistically analyzed after. But there's all these different ways you can do it, and we have to find out for them.
And you also assist with analyzing the results. Is that correct?
Right. So we have a dashboard. We have dashboards for, I'll just say the survey function. So it's an easy sneak peek at your data coming in. So you can watch as everybody's answering your questionnaire, what they said, where they're from. And you can also if you want something deeper, you can then export it into some statistical analysis software or visual data visualizing software. So there's all sorts of ways that you can analyze it within the system, but also export it to another.
What kind of legal and or privacy issues abound in this domain, this business of yours? What do you have to contend with in terms of these restrictions, if any?
Right. So data privacy is a big one. So the ability to have it sort of anonymized, the data that's being collected from QuestionPro.
Mm-hmm.
Data security in terms of the location of the data. So we have servers in Canada. A lot of our competitors, they just think, we're going to have our data stored in Western United States. We have it right in Toronto. And essentially that's a big thing for us. Is also, what we do with the data. So we follow primarily GDPR, which is a European union-based legislation, but we are up to code on many things, whether it's PIPEDA, FIPA, CASL. We're now going through that now as the Canadian office opens. We're really doing a deep dive, and we have a task force on this, and we're going to make sure that we follow all the rules and regulations.
As an example of one of your products, I was looking at your website, and you talk about happy employees and an intuitive dashboard. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, I wish I could go really deep in this, but what I can say is, so Workforce is one of those, with the tools within. So we have that, we have surveys, we have more the qualitative function that you're saying in communities. We also have one that's dedicated to Workforce. So if we have if we determine that's one of the solutions, like they obviously want to research their workers and the health of their workers and mental health of their workers, then they can use that tool within. And it's, primarily it's like a survey regularly, but they make sure that, it's obviously there's some checks and balances with keeping it from maybe your superiors, the answers, but there's also, follow-ups. You want to follow up. So it's like a more 360 approach. So they're going to ask them maybe down the road, how are you feeling 6 months from now? It's like and there's other ways that are just specific to workers that they can do that.
Okay, let's shift our focus for a moment, Dan. Take it from the consumer's perspective. So I know, and I mentioned this jokingly to you a little while ago. I'm watching a video somewhere. I won't say whatever platform I'm using, okay? But I'm watching a video, and then a survey pops up, and it's like you can't continue the video until you do something about this survey, and it's just like, what? Like, come on, like seriously. So that's not you guys. You made that very clear to me.
Yeah. Those pop-up surveys, we've actually discontinued that, and especially in our research, in our survey function, whereas you can embed them in your survey. We can do pop-ups, but what you'll see sometimes is a lot of, you go to a website and you'll open it up and there'll be a survey and you have to complete it. You don't know where your data went. Some of those video pop-ups, we have questionnaires. Like if you popped up with a questionnaire and actually took it, the video would be embedded within the questionnaire. You can evaluate that way. But you're seeing a random sidebar come up and ask you to, hey, do you want to buy those called more marketing under the guise of research, where you would, like if you're watching a car commercial, hey, so when can you buy this? It's, and then framed as research. That's not something we do.
No, that's not really research. But what about something like the Canadian census, for instance? We had to fill those out fairly recently, and I always get dinged for the super specific one, that takes me 2 hours.
Right.
Do you help governments then? You mentioned Vancouver and helping them with a survey. Do you involve yourself up to the federal level, the provincial level?
So there's groups within the federal government that I believe use it, that have used it, but at the federal level, no. And for something as particular as the census, I think that would probably be truly in-house. I know they might utilize a survey, an online survey function, but we don't have any sort of that level yet. Maybe down the road, we are pretty Canada focused, and there might be something with governments later on.
What techniques do you use to create a questionnaire or a survey to make it easy for someone to answer or non-threatening, because I'm the kind of guy that I look at a survey and I'm like, well, this is a little bit intrusive, or I don't know where this data is going. I remember when I was in grade 7 or 8, we were given this very long questionnaire. There was, there must have been 250 multiple choice questions. And it's, you either want to do this or this. And then that question is leading to another question based on the previous answer. And then would you rather do this over this? And it turned out to be like a career planning type of survey where they give a result at the end to tell you what you would like to do. And I think my career was, you're going to end up researching the ancient Antarctic slug or something like that. And I was like, what? It's like, I want to be a Hong Kong movie star. What are you talking about?
That's a good career.
Yeah. You can do both. You can do both. So I just want to know, sometimes you can see there's a structure there with these questionnaires. And I was actually getting more enamored and intrigued with this underlying structure than I was the questions.
So, the logic of a survey can get quite complex. And you can imagine it can go, say for instance, you meet some criteria, you're, over 30, you lift weights, a certain brand, and the logic will skip to questions that are just formulated for that criteria. and it can go like 15 different ways. Imagine like, if it's, the brand goes this way, then it can go, or if you're a senior citizen, the questions will be arranged in that sort of way. But to make the question in QuestionPro more easy to take and to understand, there's a lot of work that goes involved in that. So there's a lot of visual sort of tools that we use, that there's an entire development team. Like there's a process of like, how can we get people to take surveys for longer? Because you can imagine, I mean, the ability to focus on anything recently has gone down the tubes, right? And it's such a skill to have. Now, if you ask a millennial or a Gen Z to do a 25-minute survey on bricklaying or anything,
there better be a lot of bells and whistles on that video game, I tell you.
Right. So we frame it in a way, so a lot of it's incentivized, so you're going to get something for doing it. Like depending on, say they reached out somehow, and because you fit this criteria, you could get money for every time you do it. Yeah. So every time you complete a survey, it's sometimes, say you're a PhD, it's going to be hard to find people that will sit down for 25 minutes and write a survey without some sort of incentive, right? So, right, because it's going to take a while. There's not that many people, so you have to pay them to increase that option. So it's obviously payment first, but there's techniques while you're taking it to smooth the process. And we have a lot in QuestionPro that we do that.
So what are the modalities you use then? Because you mentioned sitting down, taking a survey. So we were talking about a digital interface of some kind. What about on the phone? I mean, we've all answered surveys on the phone, sometimes because maybe we're lonely, we just want to answer the questions, or right. because it's something that really does concern us, and we want to know that we're making a difference, right? So do you guys engage in that as well? Does QuestionPro have phone surveys or?
Yeah. So we have an integration for a phone option. So if you, with a subscription to QuestionPro, you would be able to integrate into a phone call. And so it's a process that you do that, but we still do a lot of, and if those are important if you want to get like truly representative samples or hard to reach people, a phone might do. But what's happening with that is it's skewing towards older people, especially. Like a lot of people don't answer the phone, right? Like a lot of you'll get somebody under 25, like they're terrified of answering the phone for anybody. So it'd be hard to survey those people. So you have to take that into account. And that's worked out when you're applying your sample. Like, should it be, what mode should I use?
Ooh, I have two questions here, and they're very different, but I'll just go with one of them. The first one that I thought of, and that is, you talk about consumer products. And that's kind of a no-brainer in terms of getting a company to survey potential consumers or past consumers. You talked about government. You gave a couple of examples there. Now, can you give us an example of what QuestionPro can do in the education field?
Yeah, really good question. So back to my personalized story in that program, there was one of my roles, or one of my projects, required me to go up to students in the hallway with an iPad and read a survey. So one was volunteering in Canada. So we wanted to determine, the problem was a lot of people weren't volunteering anymore in a school. And there's a number of reasons. We wanted to find out why. So 400 students, we sampled. So I would go around interviewing people on an iPad. And afterwards, we compiled all this data. We even did focus groups with certain groups, and we compiled all this data in a really neat report, and we gave it to the dean. And they actually used that in their next years when they were marketing for, certain volunteer things, and sort of tailoring the message and the marketing around sort of like what will influence certain subsets of the school and what might not. But that's one example. But any school, you could imagine, after a course, right? Was this good? Was your teacher trash? No offense. You've been a professor, right?
Yes. I was a tenured
And
professor. Yes.
wasn't that I always
Tenured
wondered
faculty.
about those, and like I'd be like, what if I graded someone wrong? It doesn't.
Oh, don't even get me started on that. They're the only official tool used to evaluate teaching. And yet, politically in the university, and I can tell you this from firsthand experience, there are individuals who don't care. Like they literally, I mean, I may get myself in well, I mean, I'm not
Right. No, right.
water, but literally they have contempt for this because a lot of faculty think that it's a popularity contest. And I mean, depending on how you ask the question, right? Like some students will go in there and you rate someone from, 1 to 5 and they give you the best rating possible because they like you, right? But I think on average, students want to be responsible for change, and they're going to answer quite well, because there's also students that if they don't like you, and even if you're very competent, they're going to give you a crap rating. Right. So I'm not going to say that necessarily they cancel each other out, but it's not as simple as saying that, well, you provide a good show and, the students are going to give you a great rating, or you provide a bad show, or you're not very personable, or God forbid, there's some other differences that the students just don't like, and then you get a bad rating. I don't think it's that simple, but I do know that when it's the only tool that you can use according to the bylaws and the the so-called constitution of a university, then you have to respect it. You have to respect it, and there are people in universities. Academic politics are the worst. They're absolutely the worst politics, because there's people that feel that they're above the law. They really do. Mm-hmm. And you may have had experience in that as well. And I can definitely tell you stories about that. And it's disconcerting, and civil courts don't like touching university conflicts. They just figure it out for yourselves, guys, like seriously, because I mean, a lot of the people that work in universities, they that's all they know. And they've never had to necessarily, I'm not saying everybody, I'm just saying there's some that have always worked in administration in the university. They've always done their research. They've always been teaching, and going out into the real world is a very different story. It's a very different story where sometimes deals are made on handshakes, and there are some very honorable people in academia, but sometimes when you got a PhD and you think you're all that, you think you can twist collective agreements or read through them or whatever. And, ultimately you have to respect the spirit of the agreement and the people that are being represented by the agreement. These are individuals with thoughts and feelings, and you want a win-win situation as much as you can. Right. And that's what a good administrator does. They try to, facilitate a win-win, rather than a win and devastating loss or humiliation or something, right? So, and I think that's reflected also in the real world. But anyway, I digress. I apologize for that.
No. I love it. What I would say, just as a sort of a lot of decisions get made based on gut or by handshake or by things that are outside of the process that was established. And I think surveys play a role in sort of getting feedback from the common citizen, outside of like the every 4 years or, the politics that nobody takes into account. If research is done well and survey research is done well, or market research is done well, you can take the pulse of any organization or group, and it can be taken into account, rather than, like you're saying, sometimes it's just whatever the flavor of the day, sort of where the wind's going, and we need to follow that. No, this is what we're talking about. Like, listen, like this is our voice. So
we live in an age now where outrage is common, if you know what I mean. So I feel that, I'm a subscriber to the belief that, tough times make tough people. And I think we've come into some tough times, but we're at the tail end of some easy times. And I think sometimes people get preoccupied with being insulted or being offended. I could talk about that at another date, but do you have to be careful of how you word questionnaires and surveys so as to be mindful. And I mean, there's real mindfulness of people's self-identity. And then I think that there are some people that, become a little more sensitive about especially when the intention is not there to cause harm, but we can use it as an opportunity to enhance consciousness, certainly about issues and things. What have you noticed in your field, in your company, with regards to being, neutral or treating people equal? I'm not even going to go into, treating people unequal, right? Like, I mean, that's a whole debate, right?
And it's a good question, because again, with the differences in the client base, you can imagine maybe a book club in Toronto would have a very different idea of how to structure their groups of individuals. The preamble, you have to explain what the survey's about, and you have to give them sort of an introduction before they start to answer questions. And it does vary, and it varies across things. But you have to let them apply their standards in many cases. And I think it can get pretty contentious. I mean, when you're building a survey, because that information is going to be interpreted in a number of ways, right? So the setting it up and having a conversation back and forth could be the longest process in that setup, because you're like, why are we answering this? Why are we thinking? And they, there's examples that I just pulled from my mind. It's there, but I can't pull it right now. But that have really shut down big projects and stuff. But I see it. I'm trying to half cup full guy, cup half full sort of guy, and I see anytime you're asking the question, you're not listening just to pure demands from some things that weren't sort of given the go ahead. I think a survey and the information collected can help.
Well, that's a decent answer, I think, Dan. I mean, there's no easy answer here. It depends on the situation. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about your company and this branching out into Canada?
Yeah, I'd like to tap into sort of the vision of it, and maybe a minute to sort of back to sort of the trajectory I was on growing up and going through school, and all this thing was, there was a time in about a decade ago that the survey researcher, this multi-hat wearing individual that could do an interview with someone, design a survey, present, write a report. They're really a multifaceted skill set. And what I had seen in the past decade was they took that away. The jobs are kind of going away, and I don't think they got the respect that they deserved as a researcher. And I believe that now, with the tool at hand, that we have given them the tool, that they're able to take on any research using this software. For instance, a lot of them have a sort of a psychology where they don't like to speak up, or they're very more introverted in the sense where they can't bargain for what they're worth. And I've met thousands of researchers in my life, and they're some of the most intelligent and skilled and talented people I've ever met. And I think this tool allows them to do what they want to do, is do research. Whereas the business of the past decade was more about organizing the business side of things. We're on a mission not only to bring it to Canada and have a strictly Canadian presence, but we're going to put the tool in the hands of researchers and not individual companies that are making money off research. So that's where I think we're going to make our stamp.
I think it's very important that you actually mentioned that, Dan. Thank you for that. One of my jobs as a teenager, I was 18 years old, and I worked at School of Journalism, University School of Journalism Survey Center, doing telephone surveys to senior citizens in French across Canada. And it was quite a learning experience, not simply asking the questions, because I don't even remember most of the questions now that I asked. They were quite simple. But the fact that you're interacting with people who are answering your questions and talking back, and these were senior citizens, and there was a very, very broad experience in terms of their occupation, their education, even the dialect, their accent of French. I mean, if you speak to someone in French who happens to be a Françaiscoise out of Vonda, Saskatchewan, their accent is very different than someone who grew up in les Laurentides, the Laurentian Mountains, or Ville de Quebec, Quebec City. And so I found, I interviewed senior citizens. One woman, she was 92, and she had 12 children, none of whom came to visit her. At least that's what she told me. And that always stuck with me, that it was because I was doing the survey and she stayed on the phone with me for an hour and a half answering questions. She was incredibly lonely, and it broke my heart. And I contacted my supervisor without hanging up. And I said, is there anything we can do for her? And I explained the situation, and he just shook his head. And, I wanted to help her. I really wanted to help her. I really wanted to do something for her. She lived alone. And, and I found several of these cases, unfortunately. And, it really gives you an insight into not only people's desires and, in terms of consumer products, but we were asking about lifestyle. We were looking for cases of elderly abuse, but then we were powerless to do anything about it. I mean, I was an 18-year-old, do you know what I mean, who happened to be bilingual. And I just wondered where they were going to take action, because now these people became statistics. And would they still even be alive when action was taken to help in general? Was this about allocating funds? Was this about, what was it about? And so I think people also want to know that if they're participating in a survey, that it's going to cause some change, that it's going to be beneficial. So, and it sounds to me like what you do is directly that, right?
Right. And just a note on that is sort of, that's a big conversation within the research.
I'm sorry, I caught you right at the end, eh? Jeez.
No, yeah, it's a really hot topic, and I think done well and done by rules, following certain rules, because you can imagine people are saying they're researchers and get information from that elderly and these things, and it has to be, the information we get, I think, is the goal. And you're right. And if it's done well, it can lead to positive change.
Dan, can you give us a pitch for Question Pro now? So you've got an audience here, potentially of businesses, many of them in the Toronto area. Give us a pitch for your company, what you can do, your vision, what you provide, giving them an invitation, however you want to formulate it.
Yeah, no pressure. Right? I'll say QuestionPro's more than just a software. It's researchers who were fed up with sort of the bureaucracy or the ways that things were done, highly creative, highly intelligent, and they've created a system and a software that can let you do any research that you've ever imagined, from large data sets and the analytics within, to one-on-one interviews, to looping in several different subject matter experts, as opposed to, spending a lot of money on a consultancy. This tool allows you to get the answers, bring in experts, and add ROI to any organization that wants to know about their consumers and the people that pay money for them. And who are curious overall. And I think QuestionPro really serves many uses. But if you're curious and your company wants to know and your company wants to grow, QuestionPro's your thing. It's your tool.
Thank you, Dan. I think that was very well said. You rose to the pressure. What link?
Well, I'll go have a beer after.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, patios are starting to open, right? They started here. So
right. In Toronto, it's like one chair though, so it looks ridiculous.
For those interested, we're in mid-July of 2021, just to assign a timing to this interview. What link should people access to get more information?
QuestionPro.com. It'll come right up if you search it.
There you go, QuestionPro.com, and I've done that, and it's a nice website, and there is some information there, lots of information. You've got just in the raw 250 different templates for surveys available, not to mention the ability to customize them. You've got surveys and analysis for all kinds of occasions, all types of businesses, whether, like I said, computer products, we're looking at government, we're looking at education, we're looking at individuals. And at the core is this passion for the research and for making a difference, and for allowing clients and customers and consumers to take that data, analyze it, and run with it, and to make change.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
So I want to thank you, Dan, on behalf of myself, Dr. Sam Dubé of the Toronto Business Journal, and our viewers. Dan Jackson, new Managing Director of QuestionPro. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for the opportunity.